Good morning, Kenneth. I'm Mathilde,
Good.
and today is the 13th of
It's the 13th of May.
It's Ascension Day.
Yeah.
So maybe to start off, would you tell me a bit about who you are and where you're from? It doesn't have to be very long, just a short introduction.
Yeah, well, if I was to start on where I was from, that would actually take quite some time, because I was born in Wexford. I'm Kenneth Irvine. I was born in Wexford. I then lived for 5 years in Derry, then 5 years in Dublin, then Belfast, then Lisburn, then Newtownards, and then eventually to Bangor, where I've stayed. So when people ask where they used to, back in the 1960s, I remember when I used to go on European jaunts of various sorts, people would say to you, "Are you from Free Ireland or British Ireland?" Which is so simple in those days, except that I said I'm from both.
Yes, you've certainly traveled quite a bit, you know.
Yeah.
And sort of, have you any memories how you got involved in Corrymeela and when about?
Yeah, well, that came from the late 50s, early 60s. There seemed to be a growth in conference centres and so on across, retreat centres across Europe. One of the earliest was Iona with George MacLeod, and then there were places like Thésée in France, Agape in Italy, and so on. And when I was at Queen's, I think maybe it was just after I graduated, there was a Friends of Iona group in Belfast, which met in the Presbyterian, the old Presbyterian Centre there. And it was a small group, and we met well, spasmodically. And then they started talking about the possibility of doing something in Ireland. Like all of these discussions about doing something, you end up talking about things that don't happen. But then it all came to the head when somebody discovered that there was an old holiday centre in Ballycastle, which had been run by an organisation called Holiday Fellowship. And it had been out of action for some years. And it was put on sale for, if I remember rightly, a large sum of about £6,000, which in those days was a lot of money. We, I think, had a week to decide whether we could go ahead with it or whether we wanted to. And then one Sunday, there were several carloads travelled up to Ballycastle to the north coast, and found this centre was sitting on the top of a cliff looking across the Sea of Moyle. Marvellous situation, horrible building. It was an old wooden-clad building with lots of little chalets around it, which were also wooden-clad. They were all painted green, which sort of enabled them to disappear into the landscape. But it had one or two large rooms that would be excellent for conferences, and it had a lot of rooms for bedrooms and so on. Amazingly, the necessary money was found within a very short space of time, and the place was bought. And then followed a summer or two of work camps to get the place into order. One of the
and you took part in the work camps, and what were they sort of like?
Well, some of them were run by ourselves, and then eventually there were some European ones, and people came from foreign places like Switzerland and so on, and got involved. There was a lot of hard work involved. People would be up early, have their breakfast, put in a couple of hours work, and then around about 10 o'clock they'd have their second breakfast.
All right.
But there were amusing things like painting the building was done naturally from the top downwards, and it was painted white. And people in Ballycastle suddenly noticed a building that had been there, but they hadn't seen before because it was green. And they saw it, and it seemed to be building appearing from the top downwards. Light appeared first. Then I remember there were the famous hanging toilets of Corrymeela. The toilets in the old building were sort of suspended at the side, on the side of the first floor. And this was quite an amusement. The kitchen was another thing that was amusing. The kitchen had large wooden sinks. You can just think of the potential for germs, bacteria growing in a wooden sink in a holiday centre with lots of people. So those were one of the first things that had to come out, and the place was refitted. So gradually over the years, the building was developed, the program was developed, and the general reach of the idea was developed.
And so would you have been much involved in the discussion about the purpose of Corrymeela and the centre? Was there a particular emphasis on something?
I think it gradually developed itself. Mm-hmm. Because there was the stimulus from the places that a lot of us had visited, like Iona, like Agape, and so on. Each of those had developed for their own environments, their own locations. So Corrymeela couldn't just be a copy. It was a different place. And you've got to remember that this was before the, quote, troubles, unquote, started. Yeah. So the whole reconciliation thing, the stimulus came from outside, really. There was a problem to be solved, a mission to be met, which emerged. The purpose came after the project.
Mm-hmm. So the initial thing was more about building a community.
There's building. There was the question of a community of people. What would it be residential? Would it not be? And then there's the program of the centre. But the idea of getting taking people from troubled areas up for a week or a weekend, that emerged as a response to need rather than the other way around.
Yeah. And so is that how, well, you met Ray at the Presbyterian Centre, and what were sort of your impressions of him?
Well, Ray Davey was one of those people who I think if you knew him, you couldn't but be influenced by him, and you could never forget him. He was the epitome of the quiet man who achieved so much through being quiet rather than by shouting. And you know, the number of people in this island and far beyond who've been influenced by knowing Ray. Enormous.
Yeah. Great, yeah. So you had Ray, you had the sense of community, and then you know, all the practical work of getting the centre into shape. And then you mentioned in your article about conferences that you were involved in. Have you any memories of the very first one?
Well, there were a couple of things that I was particularly involved in. One was running an open day, which was for visitors to show them the place and the purpose. The other then was when I felt that there was a need for looking at the arts in the community. Could do, and I put a program together, knocking on doors and calling on friends and so on. And I think at the end of the day, it was quite an interesting conference, and it was reasonably well attended. We were amateurs in the field of publicity in those days, of course. Now you've got so much local media. I would have phoned or emailed somebody in the BBC and said, right, when do you want me?
Yes, yeah.
But in those days, everything was done on bits of paper, and I had to send out or get sent out invitations to various people. That took up a lot of time, and I enjoyed it. But then what really occupied most of my time during the years that I was a member was the financial end of things. Craig Cameron, who'd been a good friend of mine at Queen's, was the first treasurer of Corrymeela.
All right.
Point came where he was having to give it up. I think it was when he was moving to England. But anyhow, he said to me, "Would you? I'm having to give up treasurership. Would you take it over?" And of course, Muggins took it over, and it became almost a second full-time job for the next several years, because there was so much running to and fro. I would spend most weekends either going up to Ballycastle and working there, or sitting at home in my room here, working on the accounts. And literally, money was so tight at that point that on a Saturday, I would have to decide which accounts can we pay this week.
Oh my gosh!
It was so tight, but we managed to keep afloat, and we didn't have much in the way of public input at that point, grants or anything like that. Later on, you know that the amount of money coming in from public funding was enormous.
Yeah.
The project was enormous, and there were so many more sources of money that could be applied to. Later, after I had given up the treasurership and I was still acting as legal advisor to Corrymeela, I worked on a number of the grants and dealings with the Department of Finance and so on. And I could see the sort of money that was being dealt with. It was a rather different matter to my own day. But in that way, I did keep into, after I had to, pressures on time and so on, and meant that I had to resign from the full membership of the community. But that legal work kept me in touch for quite a few years.
That's true. Yeah. I mean, I'm quite interested in that open day. So you organized that at the center, and was that for the local community or for anybody?
It was for anybody. It was come and see us.
Right.
And we had different. I can't remember clearly, but we had different things going on during the day for people to come to. And one thing I do remember, we had a Cayley in the evening. Cathal Dallet, who was headmaster of the school in Ballycastle, if I remember rightly. Cathal was a great folk musician, and also a great supporter of Corrymeela. And incidentally, his son, who's also Cathal, lives in London, but is highly involved with literary events here and there. And I've done some things for Cathal Jr. in his literary capacity and in my literary capacity. But anyhow, Cathal the father, he would come up and with friends and give us an evening of folk music. And for the open day, we thought we'd have a Cayley with a proper caller and so on. And in those days, this is just an example of how one thing leads to another, and a contact from one place leads to another. The BBC Northern Ireland radio used to have a regular Cayley programme. Can't remember what it was called, but the caller on that programme was Jack Sloan. Jack Sloan was actually an inspector of taxes in Belfast. And he did a number of things at the BBC, including the Cayley, but also including football commentaries. My father having at one stage in his youth played a fair bit of football and was still involved as a vice president of one of the clubs. And we used to go to football matches, he and I, every week. And we would get chatting with the BBC people, including Jack Sloan. So getting around to our open day, I contacted Jack and said, look, we want to have a Cayley in the evening. Would you come up and call for us, please? And he said, certainly. So that was a festive ending to the open day.
All right. Yeah. But I suppose what strikes me, you did that as a member. You didn't have any staff to organize these, like the conference and the open day. You just took the initiative.
No, we all did it ourselves. For that open day, the other person who was involved was Patricia Patterson, who you may have come across. She and Ken Patterson had been, her husband, had been, I'm not sure that they were actually founder members, but they certainly were members from very early on. And she, along with me, did our bits in organising that open day. But you say there was no conference team, no publicity team, no financial wizards. We had to do it ourselves. You look back, you wonder, how on earth did we manage that? How on earth did we have the audacity to think that we could manage it?
So what would you say were some of your the highlights of those early days from your involvement?
Well, obviously, there was, apart from those events, there were other events that I didn't have any involvement in running, and such as that amazing conference when we got the Prime Minister of Northern Ireland, the first conference. But I think possibly what comes most through is the number of remarkable people that were involved and who have remained friends, even though most of them are not actively involved now. But when I look around the history of this country over the last 50 years, the number of people who have contributed for the good in the community and who came through Corrymeela is considerable.
So what do you think the main influence of Corrymeela was, and did that last even once you left the membership?
well, it's very hard to quantify some of these things. Everything that you're involved with, everything that you do goes towards what you are and what you become. And it's difficult to say, did this particular attitude come from Corrymeela, or did it contribute to Corrymeela? Was it partly from there? Was it partly from something else that I was involved in later? I've always felt that life moves onwards in stages, and each one builds on what went before. So that, for example, I mentioned going with my father to football matches, and that enabled me to have the contact with Jack Sloan and so on. Football has disappeared pretty well in the background. Follow results and so on, but don't get going to matches anymore. Other things then would lead on. I suppose my involvement with the whole Columbanus movement would have built somewhat on that. So it is another European-wide movement which is geared towards a field of reconciliation in a way. We're trying to establish a path, not just a walking path, but a path from where Columbanus was born down in the South Leinster, up through Ireland to Bangor, where he spent many years, and then across Europe to France, to Luxeuil, and then into Switzerland, where one of his colleagues, Gall, decided he was going to stay there, St. Gallen, which you know well.
Yes, I do.
And then across Breganz in Austria, and then in Bobbio in Italy, after he'd been in Milan and went on to Bobbio. So that trail, that's an international trail. It's an international movement. And there's a lot in common, I think, between the two.
Yeah. Yes, and I suppose you have kept your interest in the arts going, haven't you? I mean, you seem to be very active in Bangor too.
Yeah, that again is a sort of escalating thing. Perhaps it was because my wife was involved. Well, I met my wife in Bangor Drama Club.
Oh, right.
I happened to live around the corner, but Bangor Drama Club. And she was a teacher of speech and drama. So I developed an interest in poetry and so on. And then she was a member, the local council, Bangor Council was then, had an arts committee to organise events and advise on things. She was a member of that, but I wasn't. And they decided to run some literary events. And they wanted somebody to host the events. So first event was a talk and reading by Jennifer Johnston.
All right. Yeah.
Somebody said, well, they knew that I was an admirer of her work. So I got a call, would I go and host the event? And then there was a poetry reading later in the season, would I host that too? So at the end of that, I said to the arts officer, why not run a festival? And this sounds like Corrymeela again. She said, yeah, we could run a festival, but if you run it. So that built there. So that was from the drama club, the drama interest. Then we moved on to a literary festival, which I ran for 13 years,
Right.
And it's still going. COVID apart.
Yeah.
So that's still going. And a number of the people that I had been involved with in Corrymeela, I talked them into coming and doing things at the festival.
Yeah, so it's a wide network, and
yeah, well, one thing, as I say, builds on another.
Yeah. How would you? What would the word reconciliation mean for you? How would you define that, or experienced it, or what?
I think that the key to reconciliation is acceptance. It's a matter of accepting what other people do, what they are. And that unfortunately, here, Israel, Bosnia, wherever, there's a difficulty for some people to accept anybody who is different. And it doesn't matter whether that's a difference of color or creed or race or whatever. I am right and you are wrong. I find it difficult. Sometimes I tell people that I'm colorblind and that I refuse to see people as being black or white. And then I'm told, well, that's wrong. You've got to see them as black or white, because otherwise you're denying them their whiteness or whatever. But I think if we're all children of God, then we're all children of God.
Yeah.
And if we can't accept that, then we are in need of reconciliation.
Yes, yeah. So, well, I'm nearly finished with my questions. Is there something you feel you might like to say? Or how now, sort of looking a bit from the outside into Corrymeela, what's your impression? I mean, it has obviously changed and grown. What's your feeling about that?
Yeah, well, there's obviously a danger when something changes and grows. So long as it's moving in a forward direction and preparing to change and to build on what's been before, you can't stagnate.
Mm.
But equally, you cannot just abandon what has happened in the past. It's a matter of building on that.
Yeah.
I felt, as I think I said earlier there, that life is building one experience.
Yes. Yeah.
And I think this is what Corrymeela is doing.
Mm-hmm.
And long may it continue to.
Yes. Yeah. Well, is there anything else you want to add, or?
No, I think going back to the very early day, to the opening of Corrymeela, when Tullio Vinay came from
Agape, yeah.
Agape, and he felt that the church, that Corrymeela should be a question mark to the church everywhere in Europe.
Mm-hmm.
I think it has broadened out. It's become a question mark to a lot of things and a lot of people. Even a couple of years ago, I remember a group which was stimulated by people who'd been to Corrymeela was being roundly abused by certain ecclesiastics as those Corrymeela troublemakers at it again.
Mm-hmm.
And perhaps that's what Corrymeela is there for, to be troublemakers.
Yes, yeah.
And from that comes reconciliation.
Okay, thank you very much.
So,
thank you.
been good to talk to you.
Thank you.
Did you hear it?